Hello, everyone. I've just finished editing the Janine Grainger podcast, and it is truly an amazing moment for me to be speaking to her because she started EasyCrypto around the same time I learned about Bitcoin for the first time. So when I wanted to buy Bitcoin, I was looking at what exchanges to use, and I've just seen it grow from this small exchange to something that is so reputable, and Janine's leadership in this is amazing. I just trust her, and we don't have much of that in the crypto industry. We have divided this podcast into two parts. There's part A, which is us talking to her about her business. The second part is more about technology because we don't want to leave that part out, and she knows so much about crypto, obviously, because she's the CEO. I really, really hope that EasyCrypto becomes a well-dominant exchange and we can look back on this and just relish this moment. So thank you so much to Janine.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, Janine. Just to introduce you to the listeners, this is Janine Grainger from EasyCrypto who's speaking with us today. When I met you a couple of months ago, I remember saying that me and Nikita have been following your journey for quite a wee while and just being quite inspired by it. So we're very lucky to be sitting with you today.
Thanks for having me on. It's loving what you guys are doing, and it's great to be able to speak to more women in crypto and women in fintech and hopefully inspire more people to get into the space.
Yeah, totally. That's totally like our aim with this as well. So that's awesome. And I think before we begin, I think there's a bit of a congratulations in order from the IBM High Awards. Janine has won the Most Inspiring Person Award, which is amazing. So cool. So that's like an awesome thing to hear. It just goes to show like what a difference EasyCrypto is making and the impact that you are having in Web3 as well in New Zealand.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's pretty awesome as well to see like the fact that a crypto company or the leader of a crypto company could even be in that running in those awards, because we're still so fringe. And so I actually had someone come up to me at the awards, and I'd been trying to do business with their company, and their the governance of their company was like, no, we don't want to deal with the crypto business. And they came up to me, they're like, I've just sent this to my chair of my board and told him that, it's like those proof points and that credibility for the crypto industry is actually still really important. So
yeah, totally. It's very exciting. And hopefully that kind of positive press and media will just bring more kind of attention, positive light to the industry. We wanted to kind of dive back to when you started in like the working world and know about your experience, like who your role models were, who your allies were, I guess. And for me, starting in a corporate world, it's so day and night from uni. So I guess it's just a question that I'm figuring out for myself at the moment. So I'd love to hear what your experience was when you started.
Yeah, I went out of uni into the public sector. Actually, I worked for the regional council in New Zealand and then went to work for ATED after that. And I was really lucky in those roles to have like very strong female leaders and female colleagues in all of the teams I was in. So I got to see a lot of really positive role modeling of women in the workforce and women who were just totally kicking ass and really doing a great job and, very intelligent, very capable people. After that, I moved into PwC, which, as you can probably imagine, was like not quite as gender diverse, particularly at the partner level. There weren't any female partners in the area that I was in. And while there was like a good, 50-50 mix of women at the lower levels, it definitely tapered off as you got more senior. So that was, quite interesting and eye-opening for me. And there was, a few times of, I guess, quite, gender discrimination, intentional, unintentional in certain things, because it's a particular, I guess, part in the workforce, and there's a lot of them out there still where there are expectations of women, how you behave, what your preferences of drinks are, what role you're going to play in a project, all of these sorts of things that can undermine your confidence in yourself when you're coming in new in those sorts of places. And if you're not careful, you can sort of get pigeonholed into you do this and you work on that type of thing, rather than having that sort of full freedom of the world's your oyster and go out and grab anything you want.
Definitely is like still a way where we're still paving that way for women, particularly in the corporate world. I think I'm the same. I think we've got one partner out of 7 in our corporate commercial team who is a woman. Throughout the firm, it's a bit more kind of 50-50, but I think that in the next, maybe in my generation, we'll hopefully see 50-50.
I really hope so, right? And like, we were just talking before this recording, I was at an event this morning with, a business leaders event, and there were 30 people there, and I was the only female business leader in that room. And it was just like, I would love to see this change a lot more quickly. And there's a lot that we can be doing around, we could go on about this, we could talk about this topic for hours, right? But a lot of it is around, having the people out there, you can't be what you don't see. And so that's something I'm really, proud to be a business leader and be a woman and be in crypto. But there's also a lot around, giving people the tools and the confidence and the, I guess the understanding of how you can navigate and make it through, because it is a really challenging place, and particularly going into the corporate world, like in your position out of uni, like, how do you make the right path yourself? How do you figure out the right ways to go? And how do you find those allies and, mentors along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just definitely an important consideration at any stage in your career, but definitely at the start.
Yeah, on that side, how did you transition from, working in the corporate world to going off and being an entrepreneur? And what was the sign, like the real thing that made you pivot? Because being in corporate is a very safe, very nice job to have. Yeah. And then being an entrepreneur is extremely risky, not to mention in the crypto space. So what was the calling?
Yeah, I guess I was a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. Like, I've always had real entrepreneurial tendencies, and like throughout my whole life, people always like, oh, I was the kid doing the garage sales and the lemonade stands and this and that, and people would always be like, oh, you're going to be an entrepreneur. But I did a university degree, went into a safe corporate job, and I just hadn't, I guess, developed the skills or found the area that would work. And also, I'm a great ideas person, but not always the best on follow through. And I think it's a challenge being an entrepreneur. You've got to either be really good at doing the doing or find people and money to make it happen. So yeah, the way I got into entrepreneurship was through my brother. He had the idea for EasyCrypto and actually had built this thing, had done this, you guys might have heard me tell the story before. It's a classic. The start of EasyCrypto was Alan sat down to solve this problem that it was difficult and costly for New Zealanders to buy cryptocurrency. And he thought that he wanted to change this. He didn't know how to code, so he taught himself how to code. And then after 5 days of learning coding and building while he was learning, he put this website live where people could buy cryptocurrency. So it was absolutely insane that he built this thing in 5 days. And then he called me up and told me what he'd done. And I was like, oh my God, please take this thing offline. I don't even know what laws you're breaking, but I'm sure this is not okay. So that's how I got in. It was a bit of an accident. It was a kind of a way to keep my brother out of jail. But it turned out, I have got one of the things that's really, sort of impressed me sort of looking back in hindsight is how all the different jobs that I'd had and the sort of varied career path that I'd taken has helped me build a whole lot of different skills and capabilities that have been really useful for this particular niche of being the CEO of a crypto startup. So it wasn't necessarily an intentional plan, but at the same time, it was something that I've always sort of wanted to have done. And I guess along the way, I was building skills that came in really helpful with, a huge breadth of different things going to being a startup founder. And it's great that I'd managed to develop different skills along the way that really helped.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that you've done it with your brother, and I want to dive into a little bit later. And it's also, I feel like, a really good complementary skill set between you and him. And just kind of diving into that, a lot of skills that are considered entrepreneurial are typically kind of male traits, I guess. So I wondered, what do you think are the woman traits, like womanly traits, or can traits that are considered feminine that you kind of utilize in your day-to-day as a business owner?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of the entrepreneurial traits as being, I guess there is the risk-seeking appetite, and that's typically a more male-associated trait of, better, less risk aversion, let's call it. And definitely that plays out with Alan and I, but it's interesting because it's in different areas. Like some areas he's massively risk averse and I'm just like, come on, let's just give it a go. In other areas he's like, what could possibly go wrong? And I'm like, a lot of things. So I don't know that it's that, always that black and white necessarily, but some of the things that I think, talking to the traits that are typically seen as more, woman-led things like, empathy, I think is a hugely important thing as a leader. The thing I'm most proud about through what I've done with EasyCrypto is our culture at the company. So we've got a really strong company culture. We have, I survey my staff every couple of, 2 months just to keep a finger on the pulse. And one of the questions I ask them is, do you enjoy what you do at EasyCrypto? And also, are you proud to work at EasyCrypto? And I have, around 95% of staff saying yes to that question every 2 months. And it's like, that's been a really consistent figure. And that's what I'm absolutely most proud of. And I think a lot of that is empathy, right? Is like listening to people, understanding what problems there are, trying to, see people as people, not just as resources or as, staff to be told what to do. But, they're actually, my staff come to work and they spend 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, at their job. And it's like, I want that to be a place that they really enjoy coming to and love working in. And that was probably one of the lessons I took from my corporate career, because a lot of my jobs, I just hated going to work, like just dragging yourself out of bed every morning. It's just like, do I have to? And it's just like, that's not how I want to live. And it's not how I ever want people in my company to live, right? Like I want work to be a source of enjoyment and community and camaraderie and challenge and excitement. And I think, I think some of the softer skills that, in the past have been a lot overlooked are really what can help drive and create that.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really awesome that you like truly believe that as well, because I think there's a lot of kind of lip service that's paid to let's make a really positive work culture and stuff like that. I mean, not in all companies, there are a lot of companies that operate like really, really well and have really passionate founders like yourself. But I think, unless the people at the top really believe it, it doesn't trickle down. So yeah, it's really awesome to see like you're so passionate about it.
In my women's group, we're talking about emotions and how emotions are usually negatively framed in the corporate world and business world. Just kind of these comments like you're so emotional, and then I think a lot of the comebacks that women have to that currently are a bit more like I'm not emotional. But I want to talk about kind of reframing emotions into something that's positive, like so that we don't have to pretend that we're not emotional.
Yeah.
And seeing it as a good thing. And I want to hear like how you see your emotions play positively into the business.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think one of the things that is possibly, people like to sort of try to say, let's take the emotion out of it and like the workplace not a place for emotions. But one of the biggest drivers of success and of, companies that have done really well is leaders who make decisions based on gut. And there's so many studies around making decisions based on data versus gut instinct. And it's just like you can get all the data in the world and you won't make the right decision, or you won't get that leap forward in innovation, right? So there's something about there is this not analytical, making decisions based not just on analytical, that definitely needs to inform it, but based on gut, on emotion, on feeling, on, what you're hoping for is really, really powerful. And all of the best companies have that to some degree. And I think also just more generally, like, the emotion, if a customer is like rude to my staff, like, I feel that, like I try to help them, manage their emotions on that. But for me, I'm like, that actually, that really impacts me, because it's like, I don't want my team coming to work and having people abuse them or insult them or anything like that. And so it's like, I've got to, make sure that I'm put in place the guardrails that can protect my team from negative emotions, and also leveraging positive emotions, because the positive side of like a workplace culture, like having a workplace where your team, one of the things that we do at EasyCrypto is we have a Slack channel where we shout out when people are doing a great job or living the values. We just call them out. And every time we do like a retro as to, what was really working well over the last quarter, what everyone enjoyed the most, that always comes up as one of the things people love the most, is having shout outs and getting that recognition. So that's an example of an emotional, that's emotion in the workplace, which is really powerful, because it, benefits the person who receives it. It makes the whole team feel good. It builds culture. It's got that kind of like positive upward spiral. And that's really important to have in place, and not just be like, oh, let's not have emotions in the workplace.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely.
I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I guess my next question is for moving into the role of CEO and really like spearheading a business. How is that different to how life was in the corporate world, and what skills do you think people should focus on in preparing for maybe starting their own business?
Oh, it's a tricky question. It's almost been like, it's like almost like a U shape in terms of, in the corporate world, you'd have your sort of role, right? You do X, Y, Z. I worked in strategy before I came here, so I spent a lot of time making PowerPoint presentations. And it's like, that was what I did, but I didn't have to, do the development or the customer support or, travel bookings or whatever. It's like, I just, stuck in my lane and I did that thing. You go into startup and you have to do everything. Like if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. So I had to learn how to do marketing, which I'm still terrible at, had to learn how to do customer support, had to learn I know how our systems work, our tech stack, all of that stuff. And then over time, as the business grows bigger, you bring people in underneath you, and you have to let those things go. Like you can't be successful if you're still trying to do all the doing, being on top of everything that's happening. And it's been a really interesting, it's kind of almost like you put yourself into a position of having to own every little thing, and then you have to force yourself off it quite quickly as the company grows. And one of the things that I've really loved seeing in my company is just see it organically, develop its own, grow its own wings, build its own rhythms. There are so many things that happen in my company that I have no idea that they're happening about. Like I'll see something out in the media and I'm like, oh, we did that, or this is happening, or, the team's done that thing. And, and that's really awesome because the company won't work if I'm across everything. So that's one of the skills that I had to learn is extreme ownership, doing everything, but then also extreme letting go and, releasing those things for other people to do and trusting my team to, my team is amazing. So, and if I didn't show them that I feel that way, if I trust them to do stuff, that wouldn't work as well.
I learned somewhere that like the sign of a good business leader is when like that leader doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's like you've reached the pinnacle.
I mean, but from a practical perspective, so I guess it's quite a generic sort of answer, but practically, like, there were a lot of things that I learned across my career that I found really helpful for this. And one is having a little bit of an understanding of finance and law. So you're going to have to do, if you're starting a business and you want to be making money, you need to understand a little bit about the accounting. If you want to be raising money, you need to understand a little bit about finance. If you want to do anything, it's quite good to understand a little bit about law so that you don't have to spend a huge amount on legal fees. And then obviously social media, marketing, like there's all these little touch points that you have that are, common across any businesses. And the more that you can sort of just have a really 101 base level of skills and all of those, the easier you will find it doing a startup.
And saying that, what was the first hire that you made at EasyCrypto that like really changed your life?
Oh, that really changed our life. I mean, there's the one that probably changed my life the most, and this was actually relatively late into the piece. We'd done our capital raise and we were sort of growing quite big. And I went out and hiring for a chief marketing officer, and I had such a great caliber of candidates coming through. We appointed one person in, but there was a second candidate that I just really, really liked them. I enjoyed, the interview with them. I thought they'd add so much value, but they weren't the best for that role. And when I sat down to say to her, hey, look, sorry, it's not go. She's like, would you have any interest in a, chief of staff position? I was like, what is that? Like, I don't know what that is. This is quite an American kind of term. But she was like, she explained to me what it was. And it was basically just the person who's there to make my life easier. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. So I hadn't planned to have a chief of staff. I didn't know what one was. But when she described it to me, I was like, perfect, brought her on board. She's now my COO, my chief operating officer, and she pretty much runs the entire company. Like the majority of the staff report up to her. She runs like everything end to end across the business. And to your point of, a good leader is one who doesn't need to be there. Like with a really strong 2IC, a really good COO like I have, I don't actually need to be there. I'm stepping away from the business a lot and doing a lot more things like this where I can sort of engage more widely. And yeah, so that hire has changed my life. And that person, Anna, is still one of my favorite people for all of the work that she does that she takes off my plate.
Yeah, I think like a theme that's been coming up in this conversation so far is the amount of trust you put and like faith you have in your team, which is so amazing. And I think behind every great leader is like a great team as well. And do you ever deal with perfectionism, or like do you worry about kind of letting go and trusting the process a lot? Like I think it's quite a common theme amongst friends that I have is that women like really have like a perfectionist complex. Like everything has to be perfect. I think it's just growing up with like the media that we consume and just the amount of pressure that's put on women specifically. So how do you deal with like perfectionism, I guess, in your job? And is it something that, even crosses your mind?
Yeah, when I started at Westpac, I had an amazing boss, Melissa McFarlane, and one of her catchphrases was, 8 out of 10 is good enough, or perfection is the enemy of progress is another way to say the same thing. And I think I really took that on board. Like, you can do the most perfect, most amazing job, but you won't get anything done. And so I think I'm actually reasonably good on the like, I possibly err a little bit too much to 8 out of 10 is good enough, and sometimes it slips to a 7 out of 10. And this is one of the tensions I have with my brother, where he is much more of a perfectionist than I am. And I love that because particularly for, we have a customer facing product and he always wants our user experience, the website, the interface, how things work, the friction points to be like as beautiful, as perfect as possible. And I love that. And I really applaud that. And I like that I have people on my team that will champion that because it means that I don't have to. So I can be like, I should be good enough. Let's just get it done. And I know know that I can count on people. And again, to your point of having the faith in my team, I have the faith that there are enough of the people on my team that will call out when they see things that aren't good enough, that, and I'll trust them to do that and trust their judgment when they say, nah, we can't push with this. I'll be like, okay, cool, make it better.
That's really cool. And in terms of like perfection pressure, I'm sure there's a lot of college, university students listening to this where they feel the pressure to have straight A's and like perfect extracurriculars and whatever else, the perfect boyfriend, perfect exercise routine. And it's just not realistic. And so like as an employer, I assume you're not looking for like perfectionism, but like what are the things that you feel like you can tell women that it's okay to omit certain things, like it's okay to not have a perfect transcript, and what things do you really look for when you're hiring people?
Yeah, I mean, I say like if you fast forward sort of like even 5 years in your career, your transcript makes no difference at all. Like I'm a bit of a nerd, and I was definitely a perfectionist at uni, and I will really try to smash that straight A. I remember I got a B once in politics, and I was like, why did I get this B? And they like read my exams. They're like, oh, I think you just got a hard marker. Your answers were great. That should have been an A. And I was like, drop in politics. I can't handle that. So, it's like, and that really mattered to me at uni. And then once you get, your first job out of uni, like no one cares anymore. But, obviously that is still hard to get that first foot in the door. And maybe, that's something to consider, I guess, potentially as well. It's like, where do you want to get into in the workforce? What kind of areas you want to go? Because you're never going to stand out if you have straight A's, because everyone else, well, not everyone else, but, there are a lot of people that can do that, right? So there are other ways that you can stand out instead. And when we're hiring people, we look for, we're a crypto company. We love to hire people who love crypto. And so I was interviewing for an EA, and I had a bunch of really good candidates. But I had this one person who she'd gone down the crypto rabbit hole. She'd started minting her own NFTs. She was running like a little community group on Facebook for women in crypto. And she was just like, she was so into it. And I was like, that's why I want to hire her. That kind of thing makes so much more impact than what your grades are. And another, potential is looking at where you want to go and can you come in at a lower level to then move into the industry you want to be in. And this is something that we do quite a lot at EasyCrypto, is we have, we employ staff in our help desk, and that's often one of the easiest positions to come into because you don't need any particular experience. You just need to be able to, crypto understanding is really important, so you can answer questions and that sort of thing. And then I've had staff come in on my help desk and move off into all sorts of other parts of the business. I've got one of our team members actually who she started on a help desk. She went off to do a coding course because she really wanted to get into development, and she's just graduated from her coding course and is coming back to work for us in our development team. So that's super exciting. Wow. But yeah, there is often opportunities to come into a job if you know what industry or what company you want to work with, and then move once you're in there. It's so much easier once you can build your networks internally, find the areas that you want to work in, build relationships there, offer to help out on projects. And, that's a really good way to, rather than trying to knock on the door with a really good transcript, come in through a different avenue instead.
Yeah. That sounds really good.
It's definitely encouraging to hear as well. I think casting back to when I was looking for law jobs, I think it's really nice to just know that it's not like going through a rigorous interview process and showing someone your transcript and hoping that they'll get you through for a second round is not really the only way to do things. And I think, like my biggest learning this year has been like building a network is just insanely powerful as a tool.
So true. Like, I in fact, I don't know if I've ever told the story. Here's a scoop for your listeners.
Ooh, la la.
When I finished university, so I did economics and finance, and I finished uni and I got an interview at Deloitte, and they for management consulting. And after I went through all of the rounds, they're like, no, sorry, we don't want you. The feedback I got was that I didn't seem like a team player, and I'm like, that's such bullshit feedback. Like, how can you tell it from an interview process? And also, like, hello, but whatever. So going through the front door, with my almost perfect straight A's, except politics, and my amazing personality and all that jazz, I didn't get into Deloitte. But then later in my career, I went to public sector instead because they would have me, and I ended up working for a guy who had a friend who was at PwC, and he set us up for a coffee. And because I had someone who could vouch for me, someone who could be like, Janine's worked for me, she's a really good person, she's smart, she's capable, etc., that was such an easier option than just trying to go through, so like you say, build the networks and maybe try sideways moves if going straight up isn't always the easiest.
Yeah, totally. That's definitely like really good advice, and I'm glad we've got that little scoop.
Yeah, don't feel bad if you get rejected from the management consulting firm you want to work for. It happens to all of us.
Yeah, I feel like failure is definitely sometimes it's like almost the key to success. like I feel like when you're in the midst of kind of going through something which is not, I don't know, what you, I guess, classify as positive, it can be really easy to get bogged down and like, oh, if Deloitte doesn't want me, like who will want me? But like, look where you are now. And I think, yeah, it's good to kind of zoom out and get that perspective of like how little that actually has meant in your life, and probably informed where you are today in some ways. So
yeah, in the grand scheme, it really doesn't matter. But, your point that, and Michelle Obama has some really good speeches on this around how resilience builds, capability and strength. And I've really seen it in my own life. Like last year, I had a really hard year with the business, but I can see like I've grown massively over the last year, and the business also has grown really positively and really hugely over that time. And so it's like, shitty situations really suck. They can be so hard, but there will always be really good growth and learnings coming out of them, and building resilience is something not to be underestimated, the power of that.
Definitely.
Last year, you raised $17 million.
I know. Who was silly enough to give me that money? Sorry.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Congratulations. But for many years, you bootstrapped the business. And for people who don't know what bootstrap means, it means you basically fund it yourself. Do you recommend bootstrapping as much as possible, or do you think that you would have liked to raise money earlier?
It's a really good question. And interestingly, I was at an event earlier this week with Teresa Garding and Jenny Rudd have put together a gender investment gap. This is a tangent, but we'll come back, don't worry. And the gender investment gap looked at how much funding goes to woman-led or mixed gender founder teams versus male-only founder teams. And it was like well over 80% goes to male-only founder teams. And yet those founder teams, those companies don't perform as well as mixed gender and woman-led teams. So sort of, the headline takeout they were saying is we're investing the most money in the worst performing cohort, which is, yeah, not ideal. But I was talking to someone there about, how do we change this? And like, is there, because there is also a question around like, are we getting enough women founders coming through? And like programs like Electrify Aotearoa are really awesome and encouraging women to, start businesses and giving them mentoring and tools and tips. But one of the conversations I was having at that event, it was someone who's saying that women founders often leave fundraising till later on. So there aren't as many women-led businesses coming through in the early investment stages because they often don't raise till they get to Series A, which I was like, I've never heard that before. And I don't have data behind this. It would be great, I haven't looked into it. But intuitively, it did make a little bit of sense. And it was definitely the case in our example where we didn't go for seed funding. We didn't go for angel funding. We just, ran as fast as we could. And then we went out for funding when we were already sort of a $100 million business. And one of the big benefits of that, like there's two really big benefits of that. One is that my brother and I still own the majority of the company. So the earlier you raise, the more of your percentage of your pie that you give away. So leaving raising till later is good for that. Secondly, it did build a real discipline with us in the business. And I noticed we had this real discipline around how much we spent and how, we were very strategic with where we spent money because we didn't have any. And then as soon as we raised, that dial just flipped the other way and we were like, cash everywhere. And I think now we've come back to a happy medium where we're a bit aspirational spending, but we really watch our budgets. But as a company that had only ever bootstrapped, we really built a lot of, real intentionality and strategic thinking around where we spent money and like, is it going to provide a return? Because if it doesn't, and if you raise and you have other people's money to spend, you can get a little bit lazier on that. That said, those are the positives of bootstrapping. And I do reckon it was my path and it worked well for us. But the downside of bootstrapping is that often it means you can't grow as fast as you could otherwise, right? Like if you're just going off your own steam, and particularly if you're in a type of business where you need money before you can make revenue. We were lucky was that we could build, we built the website. Well, Ellen built it in 5 days. So it wasn't like we had to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in creating the product to then sell it. It was pretty much free to build and then we could start making money. For many companies, that's just not realistic. You do need to get the funding in to be able to build the product, to grow the revenue. So it is a bit chicken and egg there. But if you can, still maintain that real diligence and, intentionality across where you spend, that's useful. And if you can also there are different raising tools, things like convertible notes, which allow you to delay when you dilute your equity, or in other words, it lets you delay when you start carving up the pie. So you take someone's money now, but you're like, I'm not going to give you a piece of the pie until next year or the year after, and we'll see how big the pie is then. So that can be quite helpful to, reduce the amount that you give away of ownership of the company. Funding is like, I could talk about funding for a long time. It's such a complicated area, and one that when you're starting a business and you don't know anything about it, it's just like, what is this craziness? But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just starting to learn about it now, and there's a lot. Like even like I'm an econ major, like
awesome.
And there's just a lot that like I guess this is like the real world finance stuff that you don't get taught at university, and it's like you have to learn through people like yourself and like talking to business owners, and you learn about like what's realistic and like what's the maximum percentage you should give away for how much money, and all these kinds of life tips basically that you can't really learn in any kind of finance class, really.
Yeah. Definitely, like I would be really cautious about giving away too much up front. Like if you're giving away more than 10%, be really thoughtful around, is there a better way I could do this? Could I delay that decision making somehow, whether through delaying raising funds or using a convertible note or some other kind of instrument? Or, are there opportunities where you can, be more creative in how that funding tranche works? Because once you give away ownership of your company, you can't ever get it back. And even with us, like Ellen and I, between us, we have 78% of the company, which is a really high, stake, but we're still already getting to the point where it's like, okay, if we just knock off a few more points of that, then we're below 75, which is where you have majority shareholder decision making. And then if you keep knocking back, you get below 50, and then that's quite big in terms of control of the company. And these are all the kind of things that it's useful to think about. And, apart from us econ majors, not that many people necessarily understand those dynamics around company ownership and why it's important to hold on to that.
Yeah, I recently learned the 10% figure, and I was actually quite surprised at how small that is. And
is that an actual thing? I just said that off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, I heard this from another female business owner, and she's like, 10% is the max you want to be giving away. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because once you give away 10% here, then, 15, 20, it adds up really quickly. And before you know it, you've just lost control of the company you've started. And at the end of the day, as a founder, it is all about you. It's your business, it's your vision, it's your strategy, it's your hard work, and you want to retain that.
And I think also it's like you get the venture capital and maybe they get 10% or 15%, and then you have probably key employees that also get some equity. So that suddenly adds up.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing actually, to be intentional about how much of your equity you want to keep for your key employees and how you divide that up. And because I think it's so important to be sharing, the people who are working to make your dream come true, they should get an ownership stake in it. And structuring that is another whole minefield, particularly around tax. It's so complicated. But, if you can navigate through the complexity of it from a tax perspective, it's so valuable. And I think it's a really good thing for showing your staff that you believe in them and you want them to have ownership of it, but also seeing that belief back the other way. When my staff decide to exercise their option to take shares in the company, I see that as a real positive thing, that they believe in the company and where it's heading, and that's awesome.
I think I would love to talk about funding more, and maybe we'll have to get you on for another episode. Funding, yeah, because it's actually really fascinating to hear. And when you were talking earlier about diluting it to below 75%, that's something that I am, as a junior lawyer, learning about all the time in convertible notes, and particularly when you're selling a company, that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, right?
I had no idea what a convertible note was when we started doing one. I was like, what is this crazy thing? But
Neither
now
did
that I know them, I'm
so
powerful.
Yeah. And so I guess it's so interesting to hear about that from a legal perspective. And I haven't been exposed working with many startups before, but it's super interesting to hear what the considerations are from your perspective. But yeah, definitely, God, I wish I'd written down more funding questions, but maybe we'll come back.
Another one.
Yeah, we'll come back. Just kind of segueing into how EasyCrypto has developed in the last wee while. We've expanded into Brazil and South Africa, and I'm kind of just really interested in the demographics of how people use crypto, or who is buying crypto in different regions, because obviously there's a whole lot of different theses, I guess, as to why it's an important social good, or whether it's we should be moving away from like a centralized kind of currency. So do you see like any difference between like investors or just people who are wanting to like exchange crypto in those countries rather than like Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, so I think in Australia and New Zealand, it definitely feels like it's a investment vehicle. It's a speculative high risk investment tool, which I'm like, that's cool and all, but it's like, part of me is like, that wasn't why I got into crypto. Like, it wasn't my dream to provide another opportunity for people to, speculate with their investment portfolio. So I am much more interested in what's happening in other parts of the world. And South Africa is really interesting, actually. We're seeing a huge uptake in Bitcoin Lightning Network in South Africa, which is where you can use, Bitcoin's like the oldest cryptocurrency. A lot of people in New Zealand and Australia and sort of the West kind of, not that South Africa isn't West, but, US, UK, everyone's like, when you go to crypto conferences and stuff, they're all kind of like in this post-Bitcoin world and sort of all about Ethereum and EVM and what all the development's happening there. In South Africa, Bitcoin's really popular, I guess, because it's got that trust and that credibility and that longevity behind it. It's not linked to any currency, and so it's not linked to the US dollar or anything like that. But Lightning allows you to have like micro payments open, like really low fee payments, and that's really seen big adoption there. And they're starting, one of the biggest grocery chains in South Africa now allows you to pay with Lightning at the tills. We're seeing like whole my team there sent me some photos the other day of like a kind of like a shanty town where a whole bunch of people have like their, Bitcoin, on their corrugated iron shed roofs and, painted murals on the side of the buildings and stuff. And it's just like, it's really popular, which is really interesting. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one to watch. Like, I don't think we've seen anywhere near, even with El Salvador and countries like that have quite pushed it quite strongly, we're not seeing anywhere near the uptake and adoption that, say, 2 years ago we would have expected. But you know what they say, change happens slower than all at once, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's actually really interesting to hear that they're super into the Lightning Network and that it's being uptaken in supermarkets, because I can't even imagine how wild that would be, walking down the street and being like, whoa, they take Bitcoin. I've had a couple of moments like that where I've gone, I was driving up through Warkworth and one of the kebab shops took crypto and I was like, this is hilarious. Like, you will have ordered your kebab and then eat it, and still the Bitcoin probably won't be there in the wallet.
Yes, that old chestnut.
Yeah.
Transactions times, yep.
Yeah, totally. But I think the layer 2 stuff is like all really exciting.
Yeah.
And, kind of, I suppose the Bitcoin network has had a bit of beating recently with like the ordinal stuff.
I mean, that for me was like such a cool thing to be like, hey, Bitcoin's got a bit of like innovation and like new stuff happening on it. And then, obviously the fee structure wasn't set up for that. And there was a lot of complaints from the Bitcoin maxis of, how can people in Africa use Bitcoin for payments with these kind of fees? But I mean, they weren't using it for payments before. It's only things like Lightning Network, which is an innovation, in and of itself. And so I think the more that we can see those kind of innovations, the better, because it will enable adoption.
Yeah, you're so right. It's nice to see it happening in Bitcoin, like the steampunk of crypto. It's awesome.
Are we on to the crypto section?
I think we've been there for a while, but it's all right. We've got great editing skills.
All right.
We've got it nicely segued.